5 secrets you didn't know about The Truman Show. Number 1. The original script was much darker. The concept of this film is already quite dark. We have a human being who's isolated from the outside world and has complete control over every aspect of his life. When you consider that Truman is legally owned by a corporation, you have a terrifying concept that could easily lend itself to a horror film. During its conception, however, writer Andrew Niccol had a much darker tone in mind. The script, originally titled The Malcolm Show, featured an alcoholic lead character who lives in a much darker, constantly raining version of New York City. Instead of a studio setting, Christof would follow him around, talking and hiding in the shadows. When it came to hiring Peter Weir, however, the director already had Carrey in mind for the lead role. He suggested to Niccol that the film be much lighter in tone, with The Truman Show looking more like a show that people would watch on a regular basis. Weir and Niccol finally settled on a script that gave us the light comedy drama film we all love after 16 rewrites. Number 2. Truman Every Day. Throughout the film, we see a few examples of families watching The Truman Show. In order to accurately portray just how big the series was, the featured viewers were set up to represent the multitude of countries that tuned in. There are American families, a constantly packed Truman bar, a couple of elderly British ladies, and even a Japanese family, demonstrating that the show was a worldwide phenomenon. A cool little detail that almost everyone missed can be found in the Japanese family's home. In Japanese handwriting, one of the picture frames on the wall says, Mainichi Truman, or Truman Every Day. There's no way someone who doesn't know how to read Japanese would notice this, but it's a testament to the filmmaker's incredible attention to detail. Also, Japan actually attempted a real-life version of The Truman Show in 1998. Sosuna Denpa Shonen managed to be even more twisted than the original premise, locking a man in captivity with 0 possessions, including clothing. Nasubi spent nearly a year in captivity, entering mailing competitions to aid his survival. Number 3. The premise was based on Michael Jackson. There are numerous theories as to where The Truman Show's writer Andrew Niccol and director Peter Weir found inspiration. Many people draw parallels between the film and the 1989 episode of The Twilight Zone, Special Service, in which John Selleck discovers that the last 5 years of his life have been part of a 24-hour TV show. Parallels have been drawn between Utopia by Thomas More, which depicts a fictional island cut off from the rest of the world. While there is no doubt that those had an impact on The Truman Show, the main inspiration was the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson. Weir was quoted in an interview with the director as saying, "You watch The Truman Show, and while Jim Carrey does an excellent job, Michael Jackson is Truman. He's the model I used, and he's the closest thing to Truman." It's difficult to argue with his logic, given that Jackson has spent his entire life in front of cameras. From the early days of the Jackson 5 until his death, the singer had no privacy, which no doubt contributed to his mental decline. Number 4. The cycle continues. Truman's time on television ended when he managed to escape the dome, having finally realized that his life was not as it seemed. When it came to the show, however, that was not the case. If Truman hadn't noticed, The Truman Show would have gone on indefinitely. Christof and the other studio executives had planned a 2-channel broadcast, one for Truman and another for his child. The idea didn't make it into the final cut, but a deleted scene showed Christof and the other actors having a deeply disturbing conversation. Christof begins the meeting by informing the cast that Hannah, Meryl, will not be renewing her contract and will be leaving the show. Despite his wife's departure, Christof insists on the first on-air conception with his new love interest, Vivian. He explains that this must go smoothly in order for the next generation to play out, with Truman and his children at the forefront. This causes Lewis or Marlon to ask, "So when Truman dies, we just go back to the single-channel format, right?" Christof doesn't seem to acknowledge the question, which says everything. Number 5. Product placement. As we all know, product placement is abundant throughout The Truman Show. Meryl Truman, Truman's first wife, is clearly the main culprit. Meryl, as the closest actor to Truman, would frequently showcase products whenever she discovered something new at the grocery store. Advertisers would pay top dollar to get their products in her hands for some obvious product placement, but there was also plenty of subliminal advertising. Marlon, Truman's best friend, has been his best friend for many years. Despite knowing what was going on the entire time, he repeatedly promised Truman that he would not lie to him. Unfortunately, the emotional toll of his deception became too much for him, and he developed a drug addiction that landed him in and out of rehab, according to actor Noah Emmerich. Despite this, Lewis remained committed to playing the part and quietly played a significant role in advertising. Marlon is only ever seen drinking Penn Pavel's beer, a fictional brand that can also be seen on television and in films ranging from That 70s Show to The Walking Dead. Subliminal advertising clearly works, because when we look around Truman's bar, Pen Pavels is the only beer being sold.